Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, now leasing Phase 3 at the Reserve, and the B.L. Manger Foundation.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. At the core of Judaism, the very central idea of Judaism is increasing the quality of life on this planet. That it's each generation's job to make life better for everyone, the Jewish people and beyond. We learned this from the beginning of the story of Genesis, where we were told that the human being was created in God's image, which teaches us that every human being is of infinite value, every human life is equal to every other human life, and every human life is unique. And so we strive through all of the commandments of the Jewish people to lift up life, to treat each life as though it is infinitely valuable, equal, and unique. My guest today, Eli Beer from United Hatzalah, epitomizes this commitment to life. Eli has been involved in emergency medical response in Israel since 1988. With over 3 decades of life-saving experience, he has responded to some of the worst civil, wartime, and terror-related incidents. He has been among the first responders, and he has led people to be the first responders. He serves as founder and president of United Hatzalah, which is an Israeli volunteer-based emergency medical services organization. It provides free service throughout Israel with its headquarters based in Jerusalem. Its mission is to provide immediate medical intervention during the critical window between the onset of an emergency and the arrival of traditional ambulance assistance. Its volunteers are from all backgrounds and religions. You can learn about Eli's life in this amazing book, 90 Seconds, the epic story of Eli Beer and United Hatzalah. And if you've heard him before, you've heard him speak in your synagogue perhaps, or you've met him or you've seen him online, anyone you know who has met Eli will describe him as what's called a Kiddush Hashem, someone who sanctifies God's names through the way he walks through this planet. As far as Hatzalah itself, so United Hatzalah is separate from Hatzalah in America. I live in America, so most of my personal experiences with Hatzalah in America, Hatzalah of Bergen County, Hatzalah of Nassau County, and I would just say that, I called Hatzalah myself within the last 2 weeks. And I've had multiple friends, loved ones who have been in situations where Hatzalah has saved the day, where while we're waiting for ambulance to arrive, Hatzalah has been the first one on the ground and has helped people. It's a core part of the identity and the fabric of my community in Englewood, New Jersey. And to use that same language, it is the biggest Kiddush Hashem. It makes me so proud to be a Jew. And so to bring on Eli here to talk about his work in Israel with United Hatzalah is a big zchut, a big merit for me, I would say. And we have many, many, many mutual friends, but I just want to thank in particular Paul and Lynn Light for the role they played, as well as our friend Jan Weiss for everyone's role in bringing this interview together. And with that, Eli, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to chat with you. There's so much to cover. The book alone we could spend 3 hours on, but we'll try to talk a little bit about everything. An idea I've shared on this show before is what I call ish basadeh, the idea that in the story of Yosef, his father sends him out to find his brothers, and he gets a little lost, and a stranger meets him in a field and sends him in a direction to find his brothers, which changes history forever. And if you open your book, there seem to be so many of these very dramatic moments that have kind of occurred to you that have shifted your thinking, have shifted the trajectory of your life, going back to even when you were a child. Just share, I know there's a book worth here, but share some of the core things that led to where you are today. What were the moments that shaped you?
Well, I think the first moment was coming back from school on a Friday afternoon in Jerusalem, and I was only 6 years old, and I saw a bus, the number 12 bus, blow up in front of my eyes. And I was a kid, I didn't understand. It's not like today every child knows what terrorism is. Mm-hmm. And just looking at the people who were screaming for help, some of them weren't screaming at all. Unfortunately, they were killed. But that impacted the rest of my life. That actually designed where I'm going to go. And I realized something bad happened. I don't know what it was. I got home. My parents explained to me that some people don't want us to be in Israel and they want to kill us. Mm-hmm. And I said, if people want to kill us, I want to save us. I want to be the side that saves. And I think that's what shaped me.
Wow. Okay, and then you go from there. As I read, you had that moment. You decided then you're going to do first response stuff? No, you wanted to be a doctor? What were you imagining?
Well, I wanted to be a doctor. That was my dream. I grew up thinking, whatever happened to that man on the floor next to the bus that was screaming for help? I couldn't help him.
Yeah.
But he was yelling for help, and I just ran away, and I left him on the floor, and I said, did he survive or not? Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be a doctor. The problem was I was not so good in school. And I was one of the worst students in class. And I was like struggling with learning really hard. And we had an agreement, school and my parents and me, that we're going to separate. So I went to work for my father in a bookstore, actually.
This is what age? This is what grade?
I was 12 years old.
Wow, okay, fine. Your father's bookstore, okay.
My father's bookstore, it was a Sepharim store.
Okay.
And he sold English books too, but I started learning by my father in the bookstore.
Okay.
And I wasn't good enough to be in a medical school. So I said, you know what? The closest I could get to is a EMT school.
Right.
During the summer, I was 15 years old. I was actually a little younger than 15. I made a little mistake with the year, I think, because I was supposed to be 16. And I started...
Apologize later.
Yeah. I started my career as an EMT in the back of an ambulance. It was unbelievable. It was a volunteer job. I did it. He was supposed to come once a week. I came almost every day.
Wow.
And that's where I actually felt the incredible feeling of helping people.
And were you helping people? How was that?
It was great helping people, but I felt something was missing. The main part was missing. Like my entire life, since that day of seeing that bus blow up, it was always about, I want to save people.
Right.
And being in the back of an ambulance, I was helping people. And people I needed to save, we didn't get there fast enough, and unfortunately they died. The average response time of an ambulance was 17 minutes. We would get stuck in traffic, and we knew already if someone was not breathing, we knew when we would get there, we would just try our best, but we couldn't help them. So really, it was really mind-boggling to know that every single time we come to these life-saving emergencies, we don't get there fast enough.
I remember one particular story that was painful to read was the ambulance driver realizing he forgot his cigarettes and sending you to go up and get more for him while someone's waiting to be saved, right? This idea of
well, I must say that I loved everyone working with, but that was their job.
Right.
I was a volunteer.
Yes.
And a job is a job. It's like you go to a hospital, you see the doctors, they're working hard, they're putting in all of effort, but every single day they're doing the same thing and they get paid, and sometimes it's very hard to be motivated. And I was a volunteer, and I realized volunteers don't need to get paid. They're fully motivated. They don't need vacation days. They don't need any benefits. They come because they want to do something. And then I was waiting for the ambulance to respond. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. The driver was sleeping. I had to wake him up, and he had to run to the bathroom first. And we're like, okay, let's go. And he had to go. What is he going to do? And then we run to the ambulance, and it was the old diesel ambulances where you had to wait for 45 seconds to start it.
Yeah.
And then he says to me, oh, I forgot my cigarettes. I'm like, how could you go to emergency call without cigarettes? Because what do you do after the emergency call? So I was like, okay, I'm going to run get it. And I couldn't find it because it was all dark.
Yeah.
And that took time. And I'd never forget that scene.
Right.
But he was a great guy.
Right.
And it was like so obvious for him, he needs the cigarettes.
Right.
He can't function without it.
Right. And it's, like you said, it's a job. It's a very different, that's like one of the many pieces of the innovation here is the idea that volunteers, it's a totally different approach when it's volunteers.
Yeah, I saw this the day I came in. It was a difference between, I was like, people thought I was a little nerdy. I was like waiting next to the ambulance. They're all sitting down watching TV.
Right.
And I was like, okay, let's go.
Right. You're like, I'm here to save lives.
Yeah, let's go. Why aren't we sitting in the ambulance? Why do we have to sit in the TV room?
Right.
Why do we need to go to sleep if we're here to save lives?
Right. All right. So you were, despite your very close relationships with the drivers, you felt like you wanted to try something new. You had a different idea here, right? To try to shorten the time.
Well, I remember being in the back of an ambulance and seeing pizza delivery motorcycles. Israelis trying to make a few shekels. And they would drive like crazy in between the ambulances, between the cars, just to get the pizza on time so they could get a tip. And I said to myself, how is it that the pizza guy always gets to the patient when the pizza's hot?
Right.
And we get there when the patient is cold.
Right.
Didn't make sense to me. I said, we need to do something about it. We need to turn an ambulance into an ambucycle. And people said, it's not going to happen. How are you going to get an ambulance on a motorcycle? I said, why not? If they have a box, they put the pizza there. Why don't we put inside that box oxygen tank and equipment and just respond quickly like they are? They said it's not going to happen. And then one day I had an incident that changed my life.
Okay.
And I saw a 7-year-old boy choke. They called us for help. We were the first ones to arrive. And we arrived 21 minutes after. He choked on a hot dog. And we tried everything possible to save him, but a doctor who lived across the street came to join and help us. He did not know this kid is suffocating to death. He was sitting at home the whole time. But when he heard the sirens, that's when he came to help. And after 45 minutes of work, he said there was nothing else we could do. And he pronounced this kid dead. And I remember covering this kid with a sheet. And I said to myself, this is the saddest moment of my life. A doctor lived across the street. If he would have known earlier, he would have come to help him, but he didn't know because ambulance keep all that information to themselves. Right. They don't share it with others because they get paid for their work. Ambulances have to get paid.
Right.
They charge for service. So why would they give the public a notice about it?
Right.
I said, something has to be done. I need to rebuild the whole EMS system in Israel. But I was a kid. I was 16 and a half years old. I didn't know how to do it. I knew I had an idea. So I said, I can't do it on my own. So I tried convincing the ambulance services, like David Adom. I said, you do it. I have a great idea. Let's buy pagers, which you know the pagers today are used by Hezbollah. But then we bought pagers for doctors. I think they still have a few doctors with pagers.
For sure. I remember those days.
But we had pagers.
Yeah.
And I said, why don't we connect the pagers to the command center of Magen David Adom, just share the calls with us.
Yeah.
And they said, no. If someone calls for help, they must get an ambulance. So I was stuck. I actually had a great idea, but I didn't know how to get the information coming routed to me. I said, I'm going to get a group of volunteers to respond to calls before ambulances, to fill in the gap between that emergency happening, that child choking. Takes the ambulance crew to get in the ambulance, it could be 2 or 3 minutes. And then the ambulance driving through traffic in Jerusalem, it takes a couple of more minutes.
Yes.
And while the people living around this kid could know about it, and they didn't want to do it, so I said, you know what, I'll do it on my own. And I know that Israel was always famous for building the country with the greatest innovation ever. It's called chutzpah. I said, if they don't want to share the calls with us, I'm going to get the calls without them. And I somehow got to Radio Shack, 1989, with $700. And I bought 2 police scanners.
Wow.
And I said, these scanners, no one knew about them in Israel. It was a very famous thing in America. Every truck driver had a scanner to see where the police are and everything. I bought these 2 scanners in Radio Shack in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Hooked them up in Israel. We bought pagers. Gave the volunteers the pagers. And we said, whenever they have an emergency, we'll page you. Just get there in 90 seconds. 90 seconds is the time you could still make a difference.
Right.
And you could be the greatest doctor in the world, but if you don't get there in 90 seconds, no, you can't make a difference.
Right. And that's miles away from 17 minutes, 21 minutes, 19 minutes. 90 seconds is like, you're there.
Well, today it's easy to explain it. Look at Uber.
Yeah.
And if you remember, you're too young. But the taxi service, like the car service.
Yeah, sure.
It would take an hour for a car service to come.
Right.
Uber, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
We're the Uber of Lifesaver.
Right.
And they stole the idea from us. I'm not sure about that, but they actually have the same idea.
Right.
Random people pick you up,
Right.
take you to
There's people around.
people around.
Right.
That's what United Hatzalah is, random people.
Right.
You know who's going to show up? It could be Shlomo, it could be Chaim, it could be Sarah, it could be Muhammad. They're all connected.
Beautiful. Just on that point there, which is why you say it, right, so it's diverse. Everyone who can volunteers is from all different backgrounds, and everyone who you serve is anyone in Israel, correct?
Well, originally when I started, we grew up in Beit Vegan.
Yeah.
It was right next to Yad Vashem.
Okay.
Everyone was Orthodox there. My whole community was Orthodox. So we started as a group of Orthodox Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know anyone else besides, but it started growing really quickly. The first life I saved, I was 16 and a half years old. I ran over to a man who was injured. He was bleeding from his neck, and I knew he's going to die if I don't stop his bleeding. I had no bandages on me. I was holding a walkie-talkie scanner. I put it on the floor, I took my yarmulke off my head, and I pushed it in, and I just put pressure on it, and I waited for an ambulance. And 2 days later, I get a call. The man was transferred to the hospital. It took 25 minutes for an ambulance to come. And this person says, my father woke up in Hadassah Hospital this morning, and you saved his life. Wow. So when I visited him, he gave me this incredible hug, and I saw he had a number in his arm. And that, looking at him with that number, knowing that I just saved a life of a Holocaust survivor, I knew that this is it. I'm hooked in. Mm-hmm. And if I save one life, I want to save another life.
Yeah.
But I realized yarmulkes are not going to be enough. We need to buy medical supplies. The doctor actually did not understand how that yarmulke got into that wound. And he said, now he has to give him antibiotic because of that. He says, use real bandages. Yeah. So I said, okay, I'm going to buy bandages. And we started buying bandages. We bought some motorcycles, bicycles. Yeah. We started rushing to emergencies. We would actually buff ambulance emergency calls. That's how we started, underground.
Right.
And eventually the police, they saw us everywhere. Fire saw us everywhere. Ambulances saw us everywhere. Right. But we were all Orthodox Jews. And one day I get a phone call from a non-Orthodox Jew. His name is Niv Granot. He's in the book. And he said, I want to do this in Hatzalah. I said, are you sure? You know, this guy was like, I said, oh yeah, we're a little different. And we got together, and he loved the idea. He said, in my neighborhood, I volunteer in Magen David Adom too. It takes a long time. I want to join you guys. So he joined. He got his friends to join. So we became a very diverse organization. We never had religious Orthodox Jews together with secular Jews. It was really interesting. And then one day I get a phone call from a guy called Muhammad. And he says to me, I want to talk to you about something. I said, what is it? He said, United Hatzalah. He couldn't pronounce the word Hatzalah, and he had an Arabic accent. I thought he meant Hezbollah. So I got totally scared. I said, if the Shin Bet is listening to this phone call.
Come to talk to you about Hezbollah. We'd like to recruit you.
So he eventually joined with 25 of his friends. It was amazing. And that changed the organization around.
Where was he from?
East Jerusalem.
Okay, keep going, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, Abu Tor.
Cool.
And that really made a difference.
Wow.
Because then I said, okay, now I have everyone. I have the Jews, I have the Arabs, Christians, you know, I got some Druze up north. Wow. And I said, I really have a 90-second opportunity here because everyone's involved.
Right, you have to have coverage everywhere, and you need to have everyone involved. Amazing. Are there times where people come face to face with someone they don't see typically when they call Hatzalah and they get thrown off by that?
Well, I'll tell you a few funny stories. One of them was when we just started, so we were all Orthodox. And one of our guys was like a long beard and payas and a big yarmulke. And he was an EMT. And he runs over to an emergency call of a person who called for his wife. She had a heart attack.
Okay.
And he comes with the orange jacket, the orange vest we wear. Okay. And he's knocking on the door, and the husband opens the door. Yeah. He sees this ultra-Orthodox guy. He slams the door on him.
Oh, gosh.
And the guy's not knocking. Open the door. I'm here to help you. He says, no, I didn't call Chevra Kadisha.
The people who come to take away a dead body, yeah.
Yeah, he thought he's Zaka.
Right.
So he actually had to convince him he's a real EMT. He said, an EMT, a rabbi. You look like a rabbi.
Oh, my God.
And he said, no, I'm an EMT. So he came in, and he did a Kiddush Hashem.
Right.
He actually saved this woman's life.
Right.
And that was like, I realized we're doing Kiddush Hashem.
Right.
We're not only saving lives.
Right. Well, you're totally breaking down barriers, right? At the end of the day, we're trying to save people's lives here, and people are realizing people from all different walks of Israel are walking through the door, and to all different walks of homes of Israel as well.
See, the beautiful part, that wasn't my intention. Right. The reason it's so successful, uniting people, because our mission is saving lives. Mm-hmm. If my mission was to make peace, I would have more wars than peace.
Right. So you mentioned the first time you saved someone's life yourself, right? You had been wanting to do that since you were, I guess, first volunteered, and then you did that using your underground radio scanners, which is amazing, and the numbers on the person's arm. And you also spoke about Yad Vashem. I've heard you say before that you're trying to save 6 million lives. Is that the goal? Or like, talk to me about that number and what you're thinking there.
So when I was a child, I didn't do well in school, as I said, and a lot of the times when I was kicked out of class, I used to cross the street to go to Yad Vashem, and I was fascinated by just seeing the videos of Hitler. I didn't understand German, but he was so convincing, and he was an evil leader of millions and millions of people who followed him. And I said, a person who's so evil, how could he convince people to follow him? And I said, I'm sure if I'm going to be involved in good things, maybe one day I could bring a lot of people to follow me to do good things. So I don't want to say I learned from, God forbid, from Hitler, but I saw what Hitler did to kill so many people. I said, one day, maybe I could save so many people. And what if I save 6 million Jews? Then I said, it's not only Jews, it's maybe everyone I could save. So I really had a mission of saving one life, and I actually got to save more than one life. I said, but look, I have thousands of volunteers following me, and today I have 8,000 volunteers. Wow. I have an army. And these volunteers, while I was sitting here, are working. The clock is ticking, and these guys are working.
Right.
And every second, someone is saving a life in Israel. We have 2,500 calls a day now.
Oh my God.
So you're talking about, we treated over 7.5 million people since we started.
Wow. Talk about Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. That's unbelievable. And again, this is, there's the full gambit here, right? There's someone's having a baby, there's someone's having a heart attack, there's responding to a terrorist attack or some kind of other big destruction moment. Amazing. Wow. Okay. And then tell me a little bit around your relationship with your father. You talk about it a little bit in the book, but it's very interesting. Just share a little bit how that developed and what maybe you learned from him in your own path that you didn't realize.
I think my father was my biggest inspiration in my life. We didn't agree on a lot of religious things because he was a rabbi, my father.
Right. And your most of your family does not look like you.
No,
is that right?
They're all Hasidim.
Right.
And
you switched the black hat for the orange.
No,
jacket.
they actually went off the derech. They became more religious.
Oh, right. Got it.
We were normal.
Okay, fine.
And they all became, like, my brother became Ger Chassid, and my other, like, everyone became Chabad.
Yeah.
But we love each other. And my father was an incredible person. And my father inspired me when I was a little boy. He used to tell me stories at night of things that he did when he was a kid. And I think kids could get inspired because I went through that with my father. My father told me that when he was a little boy, he grew up in Lower East Side. And he used to go raise money every day while the Holocaust was going on and they were murdering millions of Jews. My father did not waste a day, and he went raising money for an organization called United Hatzalah. Same words.
Crazy.
And he used to raise money because they were saving Jews running away out of Europe, trying to get them into America. It was very hard. And they saved hundreds of thousands of Jews. And my father used to raise a kid. He was raising money. And my father told me one day, he went into a store, a Jewish store, at a mezuzah. And the guy was selling jewelry. And he said to this person, he says, I'm raising money. He came with a pushka. And he says, I'm raising money for the Jews in Europe. And the guy says, Jews in Europe? They have Jews in Europe. They're rich people. Let them take care of their own. And my father said, they're murdering them. They have concentration camps for them. And the guy says, I'm an American. I don't have to take care of the European Jews. And my father started crying. And he left the store, and he was sitting on the curb. And someone comes over to my father, who's a kid, and he says, why are you crying? And he told him, I'm raising money to save Jews in the Holocaust. And this person was yelling at me. And the guy says, don't cry. Come to my store. He had a clothing store. And he says, I'm going to give you $5. And come to me every week. I'm going to give you $5.
Wow.
A lot of money then.
Yeah.
And my father used to go every week to this guy, and this guy helped him meet other people. And I realized the power my father had of saving Jews by just collecting the money to save the Jews. And my father told me that story. And then later, after the war, my father became even more involved. he joined Menachem Begin, his group, to raise money to buy guns for Israel.
Wow.
And my father helped raise money to buy thousands of guns. My father said he raised 5,000 guns for the Hatzalah.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, I want to be like my father.
That's crazy. So that, like, first of all, I feel like there's like, Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, the actions of our fathers are the signs for their kids kind of thing, that you had your father doing this idea of like running around in America trying to raise money to save lives overseas, and this idea of not giving up. It was even called Hatzalah, which is crazy, right? Like Bad Hatzalah, like the name was already there, and then also doing it like underground, because you were smuggling radios in, and he was smuggling weapons to Israel, I guess, right?
He actually did. He actually used to go to Canada and sometimes buy guns there and smuggle into America. And my father told me crazy stories, how he used to collect the guns. My grandmother had a little hotel in Saratoga Springs.
Okay.
A Jewish little, like, tiny hotel, 4 rooms or something.
Yeah.
And he used to hide the guns there and then ship it to Israel. And I thought my father was the greatest hero in the world. Yeah. And I remember as a kid, my first time in America, I was 15 years old. Yeah. No, I was almost 15. That's when I went to buy this. That was the year before. So I was 15 years old. I came to America. My father took me for a trip, like took me to Brooklyn, took me to see the pickle store where he used to go. He took me different places. And then one day, he takes me to a meeting he had with a bunch of American Jews who my father was a speaker. It was called a parlor meeting. And my father spoke on behalf of the Soviet Union Jews, who were then trying to run out of Russia.
Right.
And they were in jail, some of them, and my father was like trying to advocate for them. And a person says to my father, I'm very moved and I want to help. And he takes out a check and he writes $5,000 on the check. Now, I was a child. I had $5 in my pocket.
Right.
And I see a check of $5,000. I said, this guy's just giving out $5,000. And I said, what is this guy getting in return? Mm-hmm. And my father said, a mitzvah. Mm. Wow. I said, I can't believe it. He's buying a mitzvah for $5,000. Mm. And my father said, yes, but that's what the Jewish people are all about. Right. And I think that was a moment I realized how powerful tzedakah is.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. And I think, we don't have to get into your numbers, but certainly one of the things you're known for is being an amazing fundraiser, someone that really has gotten massive American Jewish audiences behind what you're doing in Israel. That's like...
I'm not such a good fundraiser. Yeah. I don't want to scare anyone.
Don't scare anyone.
You can meet me. Nothing to worry about.
That's fair. All right, so let's talk a little bit around... so you mentioned the volunteerism versus paid thing, I think it's huge. When you look out at Jewish nonprofits in general, are you kind of like, we need more volunteerism in the world? Like, do you feel like this is like, it goes beyond emergency first response? Is it like we should have volunteer soccer coaches instead of paid soccer coaches? Do you feel like it's like a broken part of the system? Does that make sense?
Totally. If I have to depend my life on someone, I'd rather him be a volunteer.
Right.
Or she.
Mm-hmm.
I think volunteers, I'll tell you this way. If I have to pay a volunteer a little compensation for their work, let's say I give them $50 for every call they go out to, their motivation will go down to 90%. Wow. Because it's not enough. $50 is not enough. Mm-hmm. And they want vacation.
Right.
And they need benefits. Mm-hmm. So when you pay them nothing, they run 10 times faster.
It's so fascinating. Okay. And then tell me a little bit around, it's called United Hatzalah, right? I think that was like a big piece of this as well, is that I'm not an expert in Hatzalah across America, but as far as I can tell, it's not united. And Israel is a place where we're known for having lots of opinions and not always working together. In addition to getting people from all different backgrounds to volunteer, how did it become one united organization?
That was my hardest mission in my life. Really, dividing is easy. Mm-hmm. I think dividing is probably the easiest job. Mm-hmm. Starting a fight is totally the easiest thing, but creating peace between each other is the hardest. The Yetzer Hara,
evil inclination, yeah,
is totally against it. He wants us to fight. And you see this in Israel, unfortunately, and that's what I think led to very bad things. During the Second Lebanese War, 2006, which is now 18 years, I saw a war going on in Lebanon where they were shooting missiles in Haifa, which was one of the first times I saw things like that, into Hadera, into different cities up north, in Nahariya. And I saw that they weren't operating. Hatzalah up north were not operating. Now, when I started in Jerusalem, others copied us in different parts of this country.
Right.
Like we had Hatzalah in Tzfat, or Hatzalah in Haifa, but it was very small, not effective, not so good, not so professional. And when we came to help, some of them were intimidated. Why are you coming to my zone? It's my zone. And they said, no, it's not my area. But he said, we're coming to help.
Yeah.
And I realized that it's becoming like a really big issue because they're not really, we in Nahariya, we found a person, he was 5 days starving in a bomb shelter. He was a Holocaust survivor. And we had to get him out of there and wash him with a hose because he was so, unfortunately, he didn't have a bathroom there.
Wow.
And we took him to the hospital. 5 days he was waiting there for help. And I said to myself, we need to do something about uniting everyone. And I said, my dream was always to have a 90-second response everywhere. And we were great where we were in Jerusalem, but I want to do it nationwide. And I want every organization in Israel, they had over 100 Hatzalah organizations in Israel already.
Wow. All you were among the first in Israel.
Yeah.
Or you were the first in Israel.
We were the first.
They were popping up everywhere. And
Yeah, Bnei Brak, Ramat Gan, Haifa, it was a lot of groups, and even neighborhoods. Right. Everyone was separate. Everyone was separate. Everyone had their territory. Because it was a great idea, but there was no system above them. So I called everyone for a meeting in Hadera during a war, in a bomb shelter. We were in for 14 hours, I think, straight, yelling and screaming. And people said, oh, you're Napoleon, what do you want to conquer the whole country? I'm not Napoleon. I want to make unity, achdut.
We're trying to save lives here.
Save lives. And it was a very big problem because a lot of people had their own shtetl and they want to do it, but I forced it in. And I said, guys, it's going to be like United States. I took United States as an example.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy to unite this. You know the history.
Yes.
And I said, we want to make a United Hatzalah. And let's unite. And after 14 hours, we had a vote. 90% voted for. Not everyone agreed. And I realized it's never going to be 100%. We had a few groups said, oh, you're going to join non-religious, you're going to join secular, you're going to join Arabs, we're going to do this. Some people said, no, we don't want to be part of this. I said, fine. Anyone who wants to be part of this. And over 90% said yes. And it was the hardest thing to do, but it was the greatest thing I ever did.
Wow. Say one more sentence. Why is it so great?
Achdut. The only way to win a 90 seconds, to win lives, is when you're united.
Right.
And the only way to win our enemies surrounding us is united. I think United Hatzalah is one of the only organizations in Israel that has a real unity. And it's fascinating to see. We have 750 Arab volunteers.
Amazing.
Among 4,000 Haredi volunteers and a few thousand secular volunteers. Some of them eat pork on Yom Kippur, and some of them, you can't even imagine, they never even saw pork in their life.
Right.
And they get along beautifully. Wow. Because they really love the mission. The mission unites people.
That's so beautiful, and I think it goes both ways, right? It's more effective because you have people all over the country externally, but internally it's this powerful thing as well where you have people kind of meeting people who are different from them and being part of the same broad team. It's
the best. I walk around the country. I can't imagine sometimes, like, I see people that are in Hatzalah. I said, this guy would never be in Hatzalah if it wasn't for the openness. And I said, I told you before, I said, Hatzalah was always about saving everyone, helping everyone, but not always accepting everyone. And United Hatzalah in Israel, really, because Israel's a unique place, we don't care if you have tattoos all over your body. It doesn't interest us.
Right.
If you're Orthodox, you're not Orthodox, you're Reform, you want to be part of us. And by the way, it's accepting other opinions too. Because, for instance, every volunteer that joins has to learn a few hours of halacha, just to understand the Shabbat. because otherwise you can't get along with other people. And it doesn't change your lifestyle.
Right.
It just teaches you how to understand the situations of Shabbat and other situations. It's incredible.
Right. You're referencing there that this seemingly conflict on its face, which is you run into challenges on Shabbat, A, whether to go out and help someone, and B, whether to accept help. And so the halacha, the law, is that because the Shabbat is overridden by something called pikuach nefesh, the idea that we save someone's soul, and not that you're violating Shabbat, but that actually it's a mitzvah to save someone's soul on Shabbat. And that some people, their hesitation might be, you can't drive me to the hospital now, or you can't do this to me now because it's Shabbat. Yeah. So that reminds me, if you're comfortable sharing, I know one incident that you experienced on Shabbat was with your father, where there was an incident where you were there, basically. What happened exactly?
My father, actually, it's funny, my father owned a cemetery in Israel.
Okay.
He was a partner in the cemetery, and he used to joke around with me when I started at Hatzalah that I'm going to kill his business. So he always used to make fun of me, like, I told him, I just saved someone. He was joking.
Of course, that's a great line.
He was a real Yankee.
Yeah.
My father. So I actually, one day, my father, I used to work for my father in the business, and I was so busy with Hatzalah. It was my main thing. And my father says to me, you're not coming to work. What's going on with you? He's always complaining about this. So I said to him, there's things that are more important than work, than money. Yeah. And one day on Shabbat, my father's neighbor, runs over to me. I live 2 buildings next to him. And he says, your father's not well. Something is wrong. He called for help. So my father never did that. I ran to his house. My wife ran to get the car, Kitty. And on Shabbat, with all I have my equipment and everything. And I ran by foot because it was just faster for me. And when I got there, I see my father completely pale. I told my father, we're going to the hospital. He said, no, we'll just relax. I said, no. And as I'm talking to him, he collapsed. Cardiac arrest. Dead.
Oh my God.
I didn't know what to do. I forgot everything I learned.
In the moment.
I was like paralyzed. And all of a sudden, my wife called for help while I ran. So Hatzalah sent volunteers. The first one was a rabbi. He lived across the street, Rabbi Rosenberg. Ran in. The other one was another volunteer from the neighborhood. And the third one was an Arab volunteer who was actually driving through the neighborhood. He was going home. He was on the way to his house. And he came and responded. And they worked on my father. We did CPR, like full CPR, shocked my father with the defibrillator. And all of a sudden my father opened up his eyes and he says, what's going on here? And when he got to the hospital, the doctor says to my father, your son saved your life. And then my father had tears in his eyes, and he said to me, I'll never ever complain. And it was like a good moment for me.
Oh my God. And what an amazing piece also that in that moment, you couldn't, right? You couldn't. And then but because you had made Hatzalah, you were able to depend on Hatzalah, and your colleagues from Hatzalah were able to step in that moment and help you because it was too close, I guess, right? Is that?
Yeah, it was like, you see a father unconscious, not breathing. And you don't work like a machine like you usually work. Your feelings get into emotion. So once the feelings overcome your whole body.
Right.
You can't, it's like that's how I felt. But after my friends showed up, I joined in.
Right. That's great. And that's a whole piece that kind of runs through the book as well that I've heard from people in my local Hatzalah is that there is this element of when you're showing up somewhere, like you could come to a terrorist attack and know someone there, right? But there's this a moment of you have to do triage, and if someone passed away, you don't have a moment to mourn for them in that moment. You need to go help the people that need help. Right?
True.
Unbelievable. All right, so I want to ask you, kind of one of, there were many terrible stories during COVID, but I remember as a community kind of hearing that you had COVID, and that was like you're someone that people far and away care deeply about. Tell us a little bit around what that was like and like what you took away from that experience. What happened?
Well, this was exactly 5 years ago today.
Okay.
I was coming back, APAC convention, the last big one,
DC.
The policy conference.
Yeah.
Was, I think, March 3rd. I was there, but nothing to do. I didn't get sick there.
Yeah.
But I flew from there to New York. That's 17,000 people there. It was still, no one even imagined what's going to happen. This was like before the storm. And I flew to London. I came back. I had to go to a bar mitzvah of my friend Jay Schottenstein.
Okay.
His first grandson. Jeannie and Jay were close friends. I said, the first grandson is getting bar mitzvah. So I was there, and then that morning, I felt something weird. And I said, okay, I'm not going to go to bar mitzvah. And my wife says, are you sure? You flew all the way there? I said, if I got COVID, like the thing that they have in China, because they said, like, the weird feelings. Yeah. And also the night before, I had wine, and it had no taste. I had, like, a few signs. Yeah. And I felt dizzy. I said, I'm going to skip the bar mitzvah. I ended up in a hospital a few days later. I couldn't breathe. I literally was trying to breathe. I couldn't breathe. The doctor says to me, we're going to have to put you in an ICU. They tried everything. They gave me medication. It was very funny. A lot of medicines were trying to pop up. This guy in New York, a friend of mine now, I didn't know him then, Dan Loeb. He was advising a rabbi that was sitting in the room next to me about hydroxychloroquine, that medicine that was very controversial. And the rabbi took it, and the rabbi said, take it yourself too, because he told the rabbi, take it, because Rabbi Lipsker was in the room next to me, also got COVID. And we were like, both of us in the ICU. And that helped me a lot. It helped me a lot. But then I somehow got worse because my situation was severe. The doctors just put me in a coma.
Wow. First of all, how was that? They told you we're going to do this, and you were like, I'm ready?
They came into the room. They said, you have 30 minutes. We have to put you induce you into coma and put you on a ventilator. I said, what? I thought they're joking with me. Yeah. Because I felt better, but I didn't really feel better. Yeah. It was a lot of oxygen pushing in, but they said it's not working. So they said they have to put me on a ventilator. That's when they were starting to put people on ventilators. Yeah. And I called my doctor in Israel. He said, don't do it. And they said, do it. But apparently, I don't know who's right, but they actually said, you have 30 minutes. And I called my wife and kids to say goodbye.
Oh, my God.
I literally said goodbye to my children. I said, I'm probably not going to survive this. But I'm asking one thing. Be good Jews. Make a Kiddush Hashem. Wow. And that's it. And then I said goodbye. My kids were young. I mean, my daughter was 12 years old. My other daughter was pregnant. I didn't have grandchildren yet. And I said goodbye to my wife. I just said, just continue the way. And then I said a video to all the donors of United Hatzalah. And I actually said, if I die, please continue supporting United Hatzalah. And I said, I could see you from up there. Don't skip a year.
Oh my God, that's insane.
I was sure I'm not going to survive.
Yeah.
I was like 100% sure.
Wow.
And then a month later, I just wake up. Thank God I had good people watching over me.
Yeah.
I had Hashem. Yeah. I had Dr. Joel Sandberg, who was like, he took off work, just making sure that I am getting the right treatment every day with the doctors talking. He was I put him in charge. Yeah. It's in the book, the whole story of how I did it. And I just said, you're in charge of if they want to unplug me, you're the one to decide.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And what do you we talked about several experiences that you had that shifted your life. What was the effect of that experience on you?
I think it was the greatest effect of my life, really. I actually realized so many things. When I used to train people to become EMTs, good Hatzalah volunteers, I always said, when someone's on the floor, go down to their level. Like look at their eyes. Don't treat someone while you're standing up. I hated it. When I saw a paramedic or EMT standing up and the patient is on the floor, I always got upset about it. After being there on my bed, wearing a diaper, fighting for my life, and seeing the embarrassment I've been through, like asking a nurse to change my diaper. I couldn't pick up my hands. I couldn't move. I realized that when we treat someone, we have to go down a few inches lower. Not only be in their level, be a little lower than them. Make them feel more important. You're not the important person. The patient is more important than you. So it doesn't matter if you're the professor. You come to treat someone. That person is calling you in the worst moment of their life. Now you go down and go down 2 more inches.
Wow. It's crazy. It's also, as I hear your story, it feels like it's almost out of a movie, all these different pieces of it, right? This, going back to where we started at the beginning of you noticing a terror attack yourself and, learning from your father to fundraise and smuggle, supplies into America and the radios, the defibrillators, that your father's worked for Vad Hatzalah and now it's Hatzalah, that you had this moment where you witnessed your father collapsing and then he had that moment where he understood where you're coming from and then you had this moment where after spending your whole life saving lives of people who got close to death and felt what it was like to think your life might be over and then to have an opportunity to live on after that. And then you have this major moment in your life, right, where you had 30 minutes, literally. It was like you're on the clock. Say your goodbyes. What do you care about? What's your legacy? And then to have the opportunity to wake up from that and then reflect on it. It's just it feels like when you look back on your life, do you feel how do you think about that? Do you feel like Hashem's been giving you guiding posts along the way and that you've just been using each one to get to the next one? Do you feel like it's coincidence? How do you reflect on all this?
I think every time I had a really bad moment, it was a beginning of a very high moment. When I was low, that bomb attack when I was 6 years old led me to do something that I want to do, saving lives. That child, 7 years old, that choked and died, led me to start United Hatzalah. That moment in the terrorist attack or any other event, I always thought of how could I do things better. The second Lebanese war led me to unite people. And I think that moment where I said goodbye to my children, I said, if I wake up, I'll do a lot more than what I did before. And the most important thing I learned from waking up after being 1 month in a coma, on a ventilator fighting for my life, and 2 months I couldn't operate. So after that, I realized I need to make United Hatzalah not only for my generation, for your generation, for the generations to come. Because if I died that day, I wasn't sure if that would continue. Because I didn't have enough leadership. And I didn't have the next generations involved as much as I needed to be. The successoring plan. And the having it United Hatzalah for the Lador Vador, for generation. In that moment when I woke up, I said, I'm going to work really, really, really hard to make sure United Hatzalah is going to be in Israel, everywhere in Israel, forever.
Wow. It's funny you mentioned that because I know the next generation piece this morning, I was praying this morning and I saw next to my Talit and Tefillin was my son's Hatzalah ambulance toy, literally sitting there. I got to get him an ambucycle, I guess. But he had a Hatzalah toy sitting right there and I was like, this is crazy. It's in the water, for this next generation. It's like a heroic thing, the same way you might have had a police car or a fire truck. Now you have Hatzalah. It's part of the fabric of the community because I think, right, I guess the mark of true success is the legacy that comes after you, right? How does the organization look beyond your time? And you're certainly someone who's very heavily identified with United Hatzalah. And so thinking about what does United Hatzalah look like, 100 years from now, just to play it safe, 1,000 years from now, whatever it is, you should live and be well. What do you imagine the future of it? What is success? It's very successful now, but what does success long-term mean? In addition to bringing in generation after generation, but where do you see it going?
Well, I see it, one day my dream is that people will see United Hatzalah and say, who started this organization? And they're going to have to go on Wikipedia and find out who did it.
Right.
And now people associate it with me because I'm day and night, 23 hours a day, more or less.
And you serve, by the way, right? You respond.
I go out to calls every time I have a call nearby me.
It's amazing.
Our technology doesn't care who you are. You could be the president of an organization or EMT from Rehovot.
Right.
If you're next to someone in trouble, you will get the call allocated to you. And we don't care who you are. You go out to the calls. So I envision United Hatzalah, and now I'm really putting a lot of focus on it, on making United Hatzalah sustainable forever by bringing every generation, the next generation, already. Like if now we're working on the 21-year-olds,
Yeah.
it's not enough. We need to work on the 12-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
So the 12-year-olds, your son,
Yeah.
when he becomes 21, he knows what he wants to do. But until then, he's going to support United Hatzalah.
Mm-hmm.
The kids, the girls and boys, are going to be supporting United Hatzalah in the younger age.
Right. I mean,
So
my
when they
niece's
go to-
bat mitzvah, they
Bat
celebrated
mitzvah
by
projects.
doing a bat mitzvah project to raise money for Ambucycle.
Exactly. It's the greatest thing because these kids who raise money, they're going to grow up to be volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my goal because I want to get to 16,000 volunteers.
Wow.
We're 8,000, we're halfway.
Right.
And the little kids, like your son, and I meet kids all the time, they dream of being heroes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where this idea of sustainability and creating generation after generation, and that's where my good friends Paul and Lynn Light came up and they said, Ellie, what's going to be in 30 years and 40 years?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be 90 years old then. I hope I'm going to have the strength like Paul to be standing there, but we need to have we need your kids
Sure.
to be saying, you know what, I want to be involved with that. And creating that is a process. But we're gonna create the largest children program worldwide, Jewish children program for leadership of tzedakah and chesed. And children are going to be focused on doing good when they grow up.
Sure.
And you know, I meet people all the time. Like, I spoke to Lynn. I asked her, how did your love to give start? And she said, with that pushka I had when I was a kid. That little pushka,
Right.
the
You're
blue
building the
pushka.
habit. You're building the habit. Yeah.
And a kid gives money into pushka. And then he says, wow, I gave money. And then they empty out the pushka. That's the highlight. When they put that money and they counted how much money it is and they see $17 and they give it out, they say, wow, the kid did an impact. Because all of these mitzvahs gather into one big one. And I spoke to a lot of people like that.
Wow.
And this is a story of the Jewish people, training our kids to be good kids. And that's what I want to do and create these next generations. This Purim, 15,000 children are going to be dressed up as United Hatzalah volunteers.
Amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Amazing.
Kids want to be...
They're heroes. They're
They
heroes.
want to be ninja. They wanted to be
Right.
different. Now they want to be United Hatzalah.
It's real life heroes. It's real life heroes. You know, I see it in my community. We're literally I'm at Shabbat dinner at someone's house. They get a call. They're up and out the door. They're gone, and like everyone's used to it, and they're just like running around, like giving birth to babies, doing cardiac arrest, like all these things. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, so this is going to be like the Jewish hero
Yeah.
is a United Hatzalah hero.
Wow. All right, final question. You mentioned kind of this lesson you learn every time you go down, you go up. And I actually heard Shlomo Katz teach in our community in Englewood recently, and he spoke about how it's actually the fabric of the Jewish people, that Abraham and Sarah had despair. They had yeush because they thought they were never going to have a kid. So how could they possibly create this religion without having a kid? And then, of course, from that yeush, that despair, came all the good that came from it. You know, we're still in October 7th in many, many ways, of course, but from where you're sitting, is there some silver lining from where you're sitting coming up October 7th that you know, similar other events in your life that you feel, either for you or for Hatzalah, that gives you some positivity moving forward?
I actually, I have another book called Angels in Orange. Came out a few months after October 7th. I'll give it to you. It's an incredible book, Angels in Orange. And the purpose of the book is to actually emphasize the miracles of October 7th. The horrors we all know, and we're traumatized forever. I was there seeing everything start very early in the morning. At 6:30 in the morning, Hatzalah was already prepared with our teams in the villages, in the kibbutzim. We lost 3 volunteers early in the morning. 3 volunteers of United Hatzalah died that day, and 1 was kidnapped. We had volunteers injured, 25 volunteers injured. Many, many volunteers were hurt after, died. Some of them died in the war, like going to fight. And it was traumatizing for all of us, but it was so many miracles. So I wrote around 50 miracles in the book, like finding, the 2 children that we found, the babies, that were 10 months old, finding them in their beds while the parents were murdered. They were in their beds in Kfar Aza, 12 hours they were there, crying all day. And the terrorists did not kill them. They kept them alive. Mm-hmm. They kept them because they wanted the Jewish people to come rescue them and kill. They wanted to kill the ones who were coming. Mm-hmm. So they used them as live bait. But holding these little babies, and this is like, we felt like we were rescuing people from the Holocaust. I actually goes back to my father's days when he helped save Jews from the Nazis. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that day we saved so many people that got saved. And I mentioned stories. My wife, Gitti, she's a paramedic, and she went in October 7th, early in the morning, she went to Kfar Aza, to Be'eri, to Shderot. Nachal Oz, they had a soldier near. He was shot in his head, and my wife saw he had a ring on his arm, on his finger, a wedding band. And she said, "I'm not going to let him die." And he was not breathing. She intubated him, and she got him on a United Hatzalah helicopter. And she never knew if he'll survive or not. And she knew one thing: his name was Nir, and he's married. That's it. And 6 months later, we saw a video for his first time leaving the hospital and going to visit his son in kindergarten. His son's 2 years old. And when he went in, all the kids were singing Am Yisrael Chai. And I knew, like, we were part of the miracles of the day. Mm-hmm. So many people, thank God, were saved. Mm-hmm. It could have been 1,000 times worse. Mm-hmm. God forbid, mm-hmm. if they were waited a little more, Hamas, mm-hmm. and Iran had a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. What would have been then? Mm-hmm. We couldn't have fight. We couldn't have gone to fight back. Mm-hmm. Hamas, Hezbollah, together with Iran, it would have been the end of Israel. We actually, if you think about it very deep, October 7th was a terrible disaster for Israel, but it could have been the end of Israel. And it was actually a miracle that happened then and not later on when Hamas and Hezbollah were aligned with Iran with a nuclear weapon.
Wow. That's a lot. I'm going to say thank you there. I said at the beginning of the interview, I called you a Kiddush Hashem, and the work of Hatzalah is a Kiddush Hashem. I just want to, on behalf of myself, I guess, just say thank you so much. It's unbelievable. This is like, these stories and what you're doing and the work of United Hatzalah makes me so proud to be a Jew. And it really, like you said, I hope it inspires not only current generations to support and get involved, but future generations as well. Everyone can go to israelrescue.org if you want to learn more.
Thank you. Okay.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שווה שכי